Okay, hey guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we'll cover Schacter and Singer's two-factor theory of emotion. This is the third study in the biological approach. It's the last one, and I hope you guys are finding the other two videos quite helpful. And okay, let's start. So this study was about the two-factor theory of emotion, and they wanted to research if a given state of physiological arousal for which the individual has no adequate explanation for cognitive factors could lead the individual to describe their feelings with a number of emotional labels, which basically means that they were investigating the role of cognitive labels in this study. Okay, so let's talk about the background. So basically, some of the early research did suggest that cognitive factors could influence our emotional state, and there was a few researches about emotion, which was James Lang, and the other one was Tannenbaum. Okay, so basically, the James Lang theory of emotion states that emotions can occur as a result of physiological reactions to events and physiological response to environmental stimuli, and the interpretation results in an emotional experience. So basically, an event occurs, arousal and interpretation is leading to emotion. So at the bottom right of the PPT, you can see the image which I took from Very Well Mind. I have put the credit at the bottom. Do check out their website. They did give a lot more detailed explanation about the James Lang theory, and we just need to know about it in brief. So what example that they gave was witnessing an external stimuli leading to a physiological response, like I had said, and then the emotional reaction will depend on the interpretation of the physical response. So what I wrote in the PPT was, for example, you're walking through a dark garage, right? So you see a dark figure behind you, and then you'd feel scared, like your heart would start racing, and then you'd interpret that physical reaction to the stimulus as fear. So then you feel frightened, right? Okay, so Cannon-Bar theory of emotion is basically also another physiological explanation of emotion, which states that we feel emotion and experience physiological reactions to it, to a stimulus. And according to the theory, we react to a stimulus and experience associated emotion at the same time. So basically, after an event is experienced, we experience the arousal and emotion at the same time. So what are the differences between Cannon-Bar, James Lang, and Schacter and Singer, for example? So you see an event. So an example, an event would be seeing a growling dog, and then James Lang would, for example, would say that there's a physiological response, and then you label that feeling as a fear. Cannon-Bar would be physiological response and emotion at the same time. Schacter and Singer, however, physiological response, cognitive label, and then emotion. So let's discuss about Schacter and Singer. Okay. So an example of Schacter and Singer would be that example if a criminal tries to mug you, pointing a gun, and then demanding you to give him your wallet, you'll experience a physiological arousal. So your heart will race, your respiration rate will increase, so adrenaline will be released and stuff like that. And then the flight or fight response basically, and then you basically give a cognitive interpretation or label, and you experience fear. Okay, let's start then. Okay, so this is okay, so the credit goes to Pixelrise for the next 3 images. I taken it from there because they had good explanations of visually to understand this. So this is the James Lang theory. So physiological arousal leading to emotion. Cannon-Bar. So emotion, physiological arousal at the same time. And then Schacter and Singer, physiological arousal, cognitive label, followed by emotion. So again, go ahead and check out this website. It does give you a better explanation about the background of the different studies, and also about Schacter and Singer if you want to. Okay, so the features of this research. So it was a laboratory experiment because the participants were not tested in an environment which was comparable to an everyday situation. It was highly standardized procedure. They were exposed to the same environment, and they had a scripted response from the stooge. There were two independent variables, which was state of arousal and knowledge of injection, and the dependent variables would be the observational data and the scores on the self-reports, which was gauging their emotions, their symptoms and their feelings. Sample was 184 volunteers from the University of Minnesota, and it was 185, but one person had refused to get injected. And then they were doing the introductory psych course, and it was volunteer sampling, and they were given course credits for it. And they were cleared by student health services, so it ensured that no one would be harmed by the injection. So just take note that I have put negative and positive signs next to each aspect, and then you can try to think about whether it's a strength or weakness. But I just put it for now. You can think of it now, and I'll get back to you later. And the research method was a laboratory experiment, control observation, and self-reports questionnaire. Okay, so there was 3 hypotheses. One was, if an individual experiences a physiological arousal with no immediate explanation, then individual will label the state and describe it in terms of cognitive labels available. If an individual experiences an physiological arousal which has a completely appropriate explanation, then they will label that emotion accordingly. And given the same circumstances, an individual will only react emotionally or describe feeling as emotion only if there's physiological arousal. So the aim was to test the 2-factor theory of emotion, or investigate role of cognitive factors in experience of emotion in a state of physiological arousal with no immediate explanation. Okay, so let's talk about the procedure. So the participants were informed that the study was about an effect of the vitamin compound called suproxin on vision. So when they came, the experimenter told them, in this experiment, we would like to make various tests on your vision. We are particularly interested in how certain vitamin compounds and vitamins supplements affect the visual skills. In particular, we want to find how the vitamin compound called suproxin affects your vision. So it was a false aim that was given to the participants. They were asked for consent before getting injected, and then a physician entered and requested consent once more before repeating the instructions and giving them the injection. So there were these groups, which was epi-informed, epi-misinformed, epi-ignorant, and epi-placebo. So those are the 4 groups in the euphoria condition, and there was 3 groups in the anger condition. And epi-misinformed was not done for the anger condition because it was the control group. So what are the levels of the IV? So epi-informed, so they took an adrenaline injection and were told the correct side effects of taking an adrenaline injection, like feeling flushed. So they were told the appropriate explanation for their physiological arousal. Epi-misinformed took adrenaline injection but were told the wrong side effects, such as headache or itching, and they had an inappropriate explanation for their physiological arousal. Epi-ignorant, they took an adrenaline injection but were told nothing about the side effects, so they did not have an explanation for their physiological arousal. And placebo, they were injected with a saline solution and were told nothing about side effects, so they had no physiological arousal at all. So this is from the original research paper. So I'm not sure if you can, it's clear, but do check out the research paper. I'll put it in the description. So I'll just read for the epinephrine inform for you, and then you guys could read the rest on yourself by pausing the video. So I should tell you that some of our subjects have experienced side effects from the suproxin. These side effects are transitory. That is, that it only lasts for 15 to 20 minutes. What will probably happen is your hand will start to shake, your heart will start to pound, and your face may get warm and flushed. Again, these are side effects lasting about 15 to 20 minutes. So feel free to pause and read these at your own time. So what are the conditions participants were put in? So immediately after they were given an injection, the experimenter returned with a stooge. So the stooge is a confidant who works for the experimenter, and they are acting like they were another participant in the study. They both were told that they had to wait 20 minutes for the suproxin to enter their bloodstream. And then the stooge's routine was incredibly standardized. So the only changes were those which were caused by the participants' reactions to what the stooge was doing, and it was a double-blind procedure. So stooge did not know what condition participant was put in. And then the stooge had 2 routines, which was either the euphoria or the anger condition. Okay, so this is the entire euphoria condition or what the stooge did. So I'll read a part of it, and then you guys can feel free to pause and read. It's very detailed, so I have condensed it to this slide, but I'll just read until point 3 for you. So the stooge reaches for a piece of paper and starts doodling, saying, "They said we could use this scratch, didn't they?" He doodles a fish for some 30 seconds and then says, "This scrap paper isn't even much good for doodling," and crumples the paper and attempts to throw it into a waste basket in the far corner of the room. He misses, but this leads him to a basketball game. He crumples another other sheets of paper, shoots a few baskets, says 2 points occasionally. He gets up, does a jump shot. The old jump shot is really on today. If the subject has not joined in, the stooge will throw a paper ball to the subject and say, "Here, you try it." Okay, so you guys could pause here and read through and make your notes accordingly. I have condensed it to how it helped me understand. Maybe you would like to try another method and include more details or whatever helps you memorize. So, what was the euphoria condition? So he doodles a fish, says scrap paper isn't even good for doodling. He crumples it, turns it into a basketball game, prompts participant to join, saying, "Here, you try it." Makes a paper airplane as well, flies it, throws it towards the participant. There's a piece of paper from the airplane, uses a rubber band to make a slingshot, and then he uses files which are in the room and creates a tower, and then he shoots the tower down. He plays the hula hoop, and then he sits with his feet on the table. So there was also an anger condition. So the stooge will come in, and then he will complain about getting injected and how he couldn't say no after making them wait for so long. Right. Okay. So after that, they're given a very long questionnaire, which is 5 pages long, and then the questionnaire becomes increasingly personal and insulting. The stooge will like first flip through the questionnaire, and then he'll complain about how long the entire questionnaire is, and then the stooge will pace himself along with the participant as he does the questionnaire, and he tries to remain at the same question as the participant, so he can make comments on that question as the participant is reading it or he's trying to write his answers. And then he makes a series of standardized comments along the way. And then particularly at question 28, he gets very annoyed. He reaches his breaking point, and then he rips out the questionnaire, throws it all over the floor, and then he storms out of the room. And then the questionnaire will continue for 8 more questions, and it ends with, "How many other men other than your father has your mother had extramarital relationships with?" So it continues for 8 more questions because it can gauge the participants' anger after the stooge has left, whether they base their emotion on the stooge's behavior. So these are some of the examples of the questions that they use. I recommend you to take note and just memorize 1 or 2. Maybe it'll help you improve the quality of your answers. So I'll read a few for you. So question 13 requests, list the childhood diseases you have had and the age at which you had them, to which the stooge remarks, "I get annoyed at this childhood disease question. I can't remember what childhood diseases I had, and especially at what age. Can you?" Question 17 asks, "What is your father's average annual income?" And the stooge says, "This really irritates me. It's none of their business what my father makes. I'm leaving that blank." And the question 28, which I was talking about earlier in this question point 5, "How many times each week do you have sexual intercourse?" And then there's a bunch of black, 0 to 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 6. And then the stooge bites it out. The stooge bites out, "The hell with it. I don't have to tell them this." And then the question about the mother having extramarital relationships is on top. So again, feel free to stop and make notes. I recommend you to at least try to memorize one question and how the stooge responded to that question. It will help you improve your quality of your answers. So data for this study was collected in 2 ways, which was standardized observation and self-reports. So standardized observation, it was done behind a one-way mirror. So it was covert observation. So the participant did not know that they were being observed. Okay, so there was also independent observation, meaning there was more than one observer. They recorded data by themselves first, and then they compared between each other, and they had high inter-rater reliability. And then behaviors under euphoria were recorded under whether the participant joined the activity, initiated an activity, he just watched the stooge, or he ignored the stooge completely. And then for the anger condition, there were different behavioral categories. So agrees with the comment that the stooge has made, disagrees with it, initiates an agreement or disagreement, watches stooge or ignores stooge. Again, this was incredibly standardized, and they used a behavior checklist, and that's a positive point. We'll talk about that in the evaluation. So data collection by self-reports was mainly for checking emotion and side effects. So they use a 5-point scale to gauge emotion. Generally, I like to remember this point. 0 being I don't feel happy, I don't feel at all happy or good, and I feel extremely happy or good for 0.5. So the question is on the right, and then a 4-point scale they use to gauge side effects. So 0 being not at all, and 3 being an intensive amount. So bottom right, it was, have you experienced any palpitation, consciousness of your own heartbeat? Not at all, a slight amount, a moderate amount, an intense amount, 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's carry on. So end of procedure. So there was a complete debriefing, and then they were told about why it was necessary. Also asked participants if they were suspicious of stooge. So why was this important? So in terms of ethics, they did tell them that they were being deceived, and then demand characteristics, because if they were suspicious of stooge, they were likely not to follow his behavior, knowing that, oh, he's working for the experiment. So I wouldn't. I think he's just come here to try to make me behave in a particular way or something like that. So they would be more reserved, and they would not likely just follow through with the experiments. So the results. So again, so 11 participants was suspicious of the stooge, which was about some crucial feature of the experiment. The data was discarded, and 5 participants, they had no physiological reaction to the epinephrine injection, so they were also excluded for data analysis, which left 168 participants left to be analyzed. Okay, so in the euphoria group, epi misinformed was the happiest, followed by epi ignorant, placebo, and then epi informed, according to both self-reports and observations. So this was accurate to the hypothesis, because epi misinformed being happiest shows that they had no explanation for their emotion. So basically, they based it on the stooge's behavior. And then in the anger group, the self-report showed that epi informed was angriest, followed by placebo, and then ignorant, which was contradictory to the original hypothesis. But then observation showed that proved the hypothesis correct, as it showed that epi ignorant was angriest, followed by placebo, and then informed. Again, like I said, the discarded data of 16 people. Okay, let's carry on. So about the strength, so I recommend you to just stop here and try to look at this, and again think for yourself why the data collection method was valid, and why the listed points are strengths, and why the how they are strengths. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so participants were unaware that they were being watched. So observations took place behind a one-way mirror. So their behavior was representative of their natural behavior. Covert observation. So that's a good point. In the observer reliability of R equals 0.88, which indicates that interpretations of behavior was valid, as there was lesser researcher bias and lesser subjective interpretation, as data was cross-checked between two or more observers. They were given a behavioral checklist for euphoria and anger conditions. So they basically only collected data that was relevant, and all data which was irrelevant would not be recorded down. So in the euphoria condition, for example, the following categories of initiates activities, joins activity, watches stooge, and ignores stooge. And then they discarded the data of 16 people. So 11 were suspicious of stooge, and 5 were unaffected by neuralin, which would skew the data. So discarding the data made the data final data set valid for analysis. Double-blind technique. So stooge was not aware of the participant conditions, so it prevented demand characteristics on part of the stooge, and then it improved the validity of the data. Let's move on to the lab experiment. So why was lab experiment a strength? So there was high level of control, so can be more confident of the causal relationship which is being determined, standardized procedure, so it makes the study very reliable and easy to replicate. So it's easy to replicate, so it can be tested for reliability. So what are some of the controls that were used in the study? So try to think of some controls used in the study. So I'll give a few examples. The Stooges routine, which was standardized, concentration and volume of the injection given to them, setting of the room that participants were put in, the questionnaire is given to all participants in the anger condition, and then the questionnaire is given to check their emotion and side effects at the end. Okay, so that all contributes to reliability as well, and making the entire procedure very standardized. Okay, so weakness. All right, so stop here for a second. Try to think about why these 4 points are weaknesses, and then let's carry on. Sample. So androcentric. So that means there was only male students who were part of the study. So who knows if it would be generalizable to female students or female participants, not representative of the target population, right? Volunteer sampling, all the participants were from the University of Minnesota. So they might be from a similar social and economic background. They may have similar characteristics, so they might not be representative of the wider population. So it limits generalizability. Sample only consisted of a younger age group, and then they were also from the introductory cycles. So you could argue that they were aware of how experiments are conducted, so they are more likely to be suspicious of the stooge or the experimental setting. And then you could support that by saying that, oh, 11 participants were suspicious of the stooge and their data had to be discarded. Ethics. So, okay, so I'll just go to ethics first. So, deception. So they were not told the true aim of the study, which was what false aim were they told. It was about testing the use of suproxene on vision. So informed consent cannot be taken. And they did not know what they were injected with either. So they were told suproxene, but it was in reality it was an adrenaline or saline solution. So what about physical and psychological harm? So physical, you could say that injection may have caused them pain and injury, so they were not protected. Psychological, you could say that in the anger condition, they were put in an unpleasant mental state. So they were deliberately made to do an insulting questionnaire. Invasion of privacy. Also, the anger condition, the questionnaire they were given, it contained a lot of questions which was forcing them to write about their personal lives. Independent measure design, so participant variables. So some people are more jovial, or they might get angry faster than others. So this would have affected their response to stooge's behavior. So it would decrease the internal validity. And also the mood of the participants. So there was no assessment of the participants' mood just before the injection. So maybe they were coming to the lab and then maybe someone knocked them down or something. They would be in a bad mood, right? So if they were in a better mood, they would react more positively to playful stooge, for example. And then it lacked ecological validity. It was conducted in a laboratory experiment. That's just one aspect. The other aspect is that they were injected with an adrenaline injection. So the emotion it was induced, and it's not in reality, it's not exactly how emotion is experienced. So it limits the application to real life as well. Okay, so this was quite a long study, so I hope you got everything. I would recommend, if you didn't, maybe go and watch the video from the start again once or twice. It took me a while to fully understand this chapter. Once again, I'll be uploading all the useful websites and additional information in the description. So I recommend that you do additional reading outside the textbook. The research paper for this is quite long, and it's quite tedious to read and see through the small details. So I'll be posting that. So I recommend you to read that as well. And as always, I hope you found this video quite useful. And again, I hope you enjoyed the class. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye.